Absolutely.
I'd like to make a resolution for consideration. It would be Resolution 2016-2013, and I can read it for you.
Oh, that's all one.
Yeah.
It says, thank you. I would like this.
It'd be a resolution of the Lower Makefield Township Board of Supervisors urging state and federal lawmakers to enact stronger protections against gun violence. Whereas on average, over 111,000 people are shot and 32,964 people die from gun violence and murders, assaults, suicide and suicide attempts, unintentional shootings, or by police intervention in America every year. And millions of guns are sold every year with no questions asked transactions. And whereas the Lower Makefield Township Board of Supervisors recognizes the Second Amendment and the rights therein, such as the right to individual gun ownership and the right to self-defense, it also recognizes that said rights are not unlimited and supports reasonable measures to ensure greater safety in the ownership, procurement, and the use of guns in our society. And whereas the Lower Makefield Township Board of Supervisors wishes to support its police force and its ability to protect the safety of the citizens of the township without threat from assault weapons or armed criminals, and whereas the Lower Makefield Township Board of Supervisors is charged with securing the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of the township, yet is not recognized as having the legal authority to enact gun safety laws, now therefore be it resolved by the Lower Makefield Township Board of Supervisors that the Lower Makefield Township believes that additional gun safety laws are needed to protect the safety and health of our residents, and urges the Pennsylvania General Assembly and the United States Congress to enact laws to reduce gun violence, including 1. Preventing known and suspected terrorists and those convicted of violent hate crimes and those with a history of domestic abuse from legally buying guns. 2. Ensuring that background checks are required on all gun sales, including online and at gun shows. In Pennsylvania, preserve the provisions of the Pennsylvania Internet Instant Check System, PICS, which provides instant access to background records. 3. Funding research into the effects of gun violence and gun safety technology. 4. Requiring trigger locks on all firearms in homes where children are present. 5. Banning access to assault rifles. 6. Reducing the number of permissible cartridges in a clip or magazine. 7. Allowing municipalities to limit gun possession and use on municipality-owned properties. And this resolution shall be distributed to the President Barack Obama, Governor Thomas Wolf, Senators Casey and Toomey, Congressman Mike Fitzpatrick, State Senator Chuck McElhaney, State Senator Steve Sanacero, resolved the 7th day of September 2016. This resolution was recently passed unanimously by Soulbury Township last evening with very similar language, and is under consideration by other municipalities in Lower Bucks County as well as the rest of Bucks County.
Thank you, John. My sense is, and I have a strong sense of this, that this should be something for public discussion, an agenda item. It should be something that people who may want to weigh in on this and give their strong feelings. This was an issue, similar issue certainly, that came up, I think when Kristen and I first started going back to 2012. And so a couple of the issues here that are raised in your resolution about allowing municipalities to limit gun possession and use on municipality-owned properties was the preemption doctrine. It raised issues around, basically townships being preempted by state law from passing any sort of restrictions. So I would think it's probably in our best interest to have it we could have it on the agenda for September 21st if you're interested, and then we could have a full discussion. We have a pretty light crowd, and Second Amendment issues usually have a lot of passionate proponents on both sides of the issue, and I'm sure our residents would probably appreciate the opportunity to get some notice on this issue. So I would be in favor of placing it on the agenda for September 21st.
I don't think this, it's really like resolving that we ask our state to do this. And I'm speaking as someone who personally owns her own rifle and shotgun, and my husband owns a rifle and shotgun, so I don't believe that everybody should have their guns removed. But I have seen, unfortunately, being a teacher, what happens with guns in homes, especially with children. And often the gun that you keep for self-defense, the homeowner ends up being shot, or one of the homeowner's family. So I think this is something we really need to discuss and do. I don't think this is putting any laws on the books. It's not telling anyone that if they come to Lower Makefield Township that there are certain laws. I think it's just asking our government to look at this, discuss it on the level where laws can be passed, and just say that we in Lower Makefield, really want to stop. The only way we can stop this violence is individually. It has to start somewhere. And it's like peace. It has to start somewhere. And if it has to start with me, so be it. But I really feel that this is important. I don't want to pick up a phone or a TV and hear that someone else has lost their child. I know how painful that is. I don't want to hear that someone's lost their husband. I have watched people who've seen violent death. So I think this is something that putting it off is kind of what we've been doing for a long time. So that's just my feeling.
Supervisor Tyler?
First of all, this is not an agendized item. Doing anything this evening would be completely inappropriate. Second of all, we have absolutely zero authority over the subject matter of gun control. And dragging our township into an issue that is as contentious as we all know it is distracts from our job. We have plenty of work to do here. And I think it creates an unnecessary conflict. I don't believe in paper tigers. I don't believe in passing resolutions that mean nothing. I think we all have the ability to pick up the telephone and call our state representatives. And I believe our state representatives are fully aware, far more aware than we are, of the scope and depth of the problem. There's a lot of research that would need to be done here. And of course, I would have no objection to agendizing anything we'd like to discuss, but I think it's unnecessary distraction from the working business of the town of Lower Makefield government.
Supervisor Fritsch, I don't know if anybody else, I agree with that. I think there's certain things in here I would not be inclined to support, including number 7 about municipalities limiting gun possession and use on municipality-owned properties. It's contrary to Pennsylvania Supreme Court decision and state law and the Constitution of Pennsylvania as well. But I feel even stronger about the fact that it should be on the agenda for a full discussion. And frankly, I think we're doing a lot of positive things in the township, and this is something that brings politics into a board that's been pretty good about not being political. So, but I'll have Zach. I know he has strong, passionate views on this as well, as he did 5 years ago.
Zachary Rubin, 1661 Covington Road. I certainly rise in support of this resolution. I think this board has passed plenty of motions and resolutions that were not agendized, so I do think it is in order. And I do disagree with Supervisor Tyler about this is not a local municipal issue. In 1978, the previous Board of Supervisors passed an ordinance in this township banning weapons on public parks and public properties. It was deemed okay then. For 34 years, that ordinance was in effect in this township. It was a local issue about public safety, as this resolution speaks to. In 1999, the state Supreme Court in the Ortiz decision, which Mr. Benedetto alluded to, said that that is a state function about guns and guns regulation, and that municipalities cannot regulate, but only the state can do that. Now, if Mr. Benedetto remembers, the first month that he was sworn in as supervisor, which was in January 2013. The election was in
2011.
2011, okay, in 2012.
It feels much longer.
Okay, it does. Somebody got up and asked the supervisors who were sending delegates to the Pennsylvania State Supervisors Association to pass a resolution to ask the state legislature to amend that part of the ordinance, giving the municipalities the right to do that. That was brought up by a very involved township resident, Zachary Rubin.
I remember that. I do remember that very well. And
Okay, and at the time, that suggestion was passed. Now, a month later, there were a number of citizens from this township and outside the township who came in camouflage outfits, military type outfits and things like that, and objected to that motion, and it was rescinded the following month in February by a unanimous decision. So this is not new, discussing it. Now, recently, the state Supreme Court has nullified an ordinance in the state legislature giving certain organizations, aka the NRA, the right to sue municipalities for regulating or having gun safety laws. That was thrown out by the state legislature because certain cities, such as Philadelphia and things like that, have that. So I'm saying it's a different political issue, era now. It's a different atmosphere now to discuss this. Now, all this resolution is doing is asking the state legislature to come up with some sensible gun laws. And all they're asking is do a letter. So I have no problem having an agenda and having more people come out in their camo and in their military style outfits to discuss this. But I think it's an important resolution. And this township should, as this resolution say, has the right to regulate, to bring safety and public health to our township. Now, at the discussions at the last time it came up, they asked the chief to do some research about where there are gun problems in 5 Mile Park and things like that. And he said there had been in the last 2 years at the time, people having guns on public property and things like that. So it is an issue for public safety, and I support this resolution.
To the comment too, just so I'll know, you're correct that the NRA, for instance, doesn't have standing to sue. But that doesn't change the law that the preemption doctrine states that municipalities can't pass more restrictive gun laws. So, for instance, what happened, I'm just using that as an example of what happened 2012, 4 years ago, when we had this discussion, 4.5 years ago, when we had this discussion, people showed up and said, you cannot pass a law. We had on our books, as you accurately stated, in 1938.
For 34 years.
And it was preempted by state law, and it was preempted by the Pennsylvania Constitution, and it's preempted by the Supreme Court, Pennsylvania Supreme Court decision to say municipalities can't pass more restrictive gun laws than the state.
So you're incorrect. That has nothing to do with our state constitution. It has to do with an ordinance passed by the state legislature. As you know, our state constitution gives a person the right to possess an arm for
the right to
defense.
bear arms shall not be abridged
for defensive reasons. Nobody's arguing that.
That's what
nobody is arguing.
That's what the Pennsylvania Constitution states.
The state legislature has passed that they can ban certain guns in schools and places like that. That is permissible in our state legislature.
Correct, not by the township. So I am correct.
So I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying it's not a constitutional issue. It's a legislative issue. And all this resolution is asking is the state legislature to revisit that ordinance.
It's asking much more than that. It's
not.
Yes, it is. Well, obviously you haven't read it, nor have I read it, and I was basically, to be bluntly honest with you, blindsided by this resolution. I think it's patently unfair to our residents. I think it's patently unfair of Supervisor Lewis to introduce this without at least giving us the courtesy to show us this resolution. I think it's interjecting politics into a supervisor's board that for the past year has been very apolitical, and I think this is an issue that has no place on the municipal level. If the state wants to pass a law that's restricting the guns in our public parks, then they're all perfectly capable of doing it without us sending a resolution. If we want to have sending a resolution up to them to let them know, you know how you feel about it, and our state representative knows how most people feel about it. The township supervisors passing a resolution, or Solebury Township or anybody else, we went down this road before. It was a mess going back 40 years ago. I remember it extremely well. And to me, it frankly was a black eye for the township, because at the end of the day, we're here to govern. We're here to pass we're here to try to accomplish things. This accomplishes absolutely nothing. And frankly, like I said, there's a number of different things in here that I have an issue with, including allowing municipalities to limit gun possession and use some municipality-owned properties. I think it's a horrible path to cross, because if somebody from one municipality if somebody from Newtown says you can't have a gun, you can't, carry, and then they come, and so in Newtown you're permitted to do it. You come into Lower Makefield and you're not permitted to carry. You don't think that's going to be challenged by a resident in Lower Makefield? I think that's a bad road to go down. The state should be making these laws. The state's capable of making these laws, and people who will challenge them, and that's their constitutional right.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, a couple things here. One, on number 7 is what we're talking about is having control of municipality-owned property.
I know exactly what you're talking
What that
about.
means is parks, the areas inside of township buildings, the areas outside of police barracks, the areas outside of
The state preempts that the townships from this is what
right,
exactly
and this
what we
is why
talked
we're
about.
asking for a simple resolution.
And I just
saying,
gave you
hey, change it.
And I just gave you a perfectly valid reason why it's a bad idea, because if I live in Newtown Township and I have a permit to conceal carry, and then a municipal law is passed in Lower Makefield that I do not have a right to conceal carry or have a gun on my possession in a public park, then now all of a sudden I'm in Lower Makefield, I'm breaking the law. In Newtown Township, I'm not breaking the law. That's why
Texas deals with this as well. I don't know if you've ever been to Texas.
I don't live in Texas, and I'm not concerned what Texas does. I'm concerned about what Lower Makefield does.
Other
Disclosures
cities
when you go into certain buildings.
they have a sign.
The signs, whether you're allowed to bring weapons in or not. Texas was kind enough and sharp enough in some measures to say,
Okay,
you can't
define
have-
assault-style rifles. I have an issue with that. What's an assault-style rifle?
Okay, may I interrupt here? And these are all conversations that are good and fine, but they are not proper subject matter of the Lower Mayfield Township Board of Supervisors.
I would disagree.
You can disagree all you'd like, and I make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
There's a motion on the board right now.
Made a motion yet, if you'd like to.
I did make a motion.
I believe you read the resolution. Is there a motion?
Okay.
What's the number? 2016?
2313. 2313. I can give you a full paper here.
2016-2013.
I believe I seconded it. I did second.
Any-
And then we went to discussion.
Yeah.
Procedure.
Yeah.
Oh, Supervisor Fritchie has comment.
Yeah, I have a lot of sympathy for a lot of the things that are in this particular motion. As I was just saying to the township solicitor, one of my professional experiences when I was a district attorney in Delaware County, we had some local firearms dealer who was selling automatic weapons to the Pagans motorcycle gang, and we wound up prosecuting him for the crime of prohibited offensive weapons, which outlawed the possession and sale of automatic weapons. We convicted him, and I argued this case on appeal and actually got an affirmance of his conviction in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, only to several days later receive a phone call from the son of Ernie Klein, who was then the Attorney General, the Lieutenant Governor of Pennsylvania. And his son was a lobbyist for the NRA, asking why I was picking on gun shop owners. And I told him, well, this fellow is selling automatic weapons to the Pagans motorcycle gang. They're kind of a crime problem in this county. And he said, I didn't realize that. Thank you very much. And a couple of weeks later, we're coming into the end of November. We're the night before Thanksgiving. And on Thanksgiving Eve night, Thanksgiving morning around midnight, the Pennsylvania legislature passed a law rescinding that particular part of the Pennsylvania Crime Code. So it was all of a sudden no longer a crime to possess automatic weapons or sell them to the Pagans motorcycle gang or anything else. So I'm not without sympathy for much of this. That being said, It's also clear to me that this has been an area of intense controversy and a great deal of litigation, and the law keeps changing, and I am not personally comfortable that I know what the current law of Pennsylvania is, either in terms of what the Supreme Court has recently decided, what the constructions of the Pennsylvania Constitution as well as the United States Constitution are that prevail in Pennsylvania jurisprudence, and what the impact and effect of this resolution might possibly be. It's also clear to me that there are provisions here that many people may support, some, all, or none of these provisions in varying combinations. It's also clear that nobody's really given consideration to this particular resolution before tonight, although I suspect most all of us have thought about these issues and have some at least tentative views in these matters. Having said all of that, my concern is I would like to be more firmly grounded in what the legal benchmarks are, if you will, and I would like to see this referred to the township solicitor to give us a report in a month or so, a legal memorandum, and let us know what the law is. And I think at some appropriate time there should be an opportunity for public comment, even though we may get people in here whose dress may be extreme and whose views may be even more extreme, and have a serious discussion about it, because these are serious issues. And I have to say, in 42 years in law enforcement, I've seen more tragedies and misadventures coming out of well-intentioned gun ownership than I've seen honest, law-abiding citizens shooting burglars and miscreants, trying to rob them and attack them. So I think this is a very serious issue, and one that the Pennsylvania legislature has pretty much advocated. But before we adopt anything in particular, I'd like to be more properly grounded in making that decision. Accordingly, I think it would be appropriate to table this pending review by the township solicitor and a report to the board.
If there's a motion to table, it would require a second, but no discussion.
Second.
So then we vote on the motion to table first.
All those in favor of tabling the motion offered by Supervisor Lewis?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
3-2. Motion has been tabled.
Does that mean it will be included in the next agenda item, the next meeting?
If there's no specific date yet, the board will have to decide when to remove it from the table at that point. I'm looking to my friend Mr. Rubin for confirmation of my interpretation of Robert's rules, and I got it right this time.
Motion to adjourn?
I already made that one.
Second? Motion adjourned.